How are you lads? How are you getting on? Hope you're all keeping well. Look, very quickly, I just need to show you this video, alright? This was a fella coming out of a gym in Dublin, Ireland, at the end of 2019, and a group of young lads thought it'd be a good idea to make this video. So let's just give it a watch.
Yes! That's only the start of it! That's only the start of it! That's only the start of it, Robbie! Yes! That's only the start of it! That's only the start of it! That's only the start of it, Robbie!
Now, that mightn't seem like much, right? A few thugs there in Dublin having an old scrap there in the middle of the street. But that would be the spark that would lead to the kidnapping, torture, murder, and ultimate dismemberment of a 17-year-old by the name of Cian Mulready Woods. So in this video today, we're going to go through the whole life and crimes of the fella that committed this brutal act, from his early beginnings all the way to up until around this time when this video was made. Okay, so without further ado, let's just get straight into it. This chair is Can you hear me there? Can you see me? Alright lads, so today we're going to talk about a fella by the name of Robbie Lawlor. A fella from North Dublin. He was one of the most ruthless, psychopathic serial killers, gangland serial killers, that the island of Ireland has ever seen. Honestly, one of the most dangerous fellas I've even heard about, ever from Ireland. You know, this story just shocks me. But anyway, right, let's start from the beginning, shall we? Robbie Lawlor. He's born in 1985 in a neighbourhood in North Dublin called Coolock. Right? He was born in 1985. And he was born into a close-knit family, but it was clear from early on that he was completely out of control. He had a lot of run-ins with the Gardaí when he was a young lad, teenager. He was known for small-time drug dealing, car thefts, and he was known by Gardaí to be a very violent individual. On one occasion, it apparently took 3 Gardaí to restrain him. Now, if I say Gardaí and you're outside Ireland, you might be thinking, what's that? Well, it's just a police force, right? So, police officers or the police force as a whole. So when I say Gardaí, just think police, yeah? Well, Robbie Lawlor, by the time he was 19, 20, he had a few convictions under his belt, and this is where we're going to get into his first serious crime, alright? So it starts when he's in Wheatfield prison in Dublin for a stint there. And he gets into an altercation with another fella, another serious criminal by the name of Mark Byrne. Okay, Mark Byrne was not someone to be messed with. At this point he was about 30, 31 years old. He was in Wheatfield prison, I think, for a string of armed robberies. I could be wrong on that. Anyway, the two get into an altercation, a serious altercation. And Mark Byrne, being the older criminal, he gets the better of Lawlor. He overpowers him in some way. I think there was a knife involved. But whatever the case, he kind of says to himself, right, this lad's not going to bother me again now. I've put this lad in his place. You know, I've dealt with him. But what he didn't take into account was how long Robbie Lawlor could hold on to a grudge for. Because when Robbie Lawlor was released from jail, he was willing to pay other inmates for information around Mark Byrne's movements. Alright, so it's May 4th, 2005. Lawlor's out of jail at this point. Mark Byrne is still in jail. He's in Mountjoy. And he gets let out of the prison for a day release, on compassionate grounds, due to a family issue. Now, within about 10 minutes of walking out of the prison, he walks a couple hundred meters up to a shop, and while he's there outside the shop, a gunman walks up, cool, calm, collected, walks up and shoots him dead. First, a couple of bullets sending him to the ground, and then he stands over him, the gunman, and makes sure that he's killed. And the gunman flees. And it's highly suspected that Robbie Lawlor is behind this brazen attack. In broad daylight, 10 AM as I said. He was brought in for questioning, he was arrested and questioned about this, but like a typical criminal, he didn't answer any questions, he didn't cooperate, he didn't say anything. And even though there was a lot of witnesses around, there just wasn't enough evidence to pin him to this murder. But it is highly suspected that Lawlor carried this out. And the Gardaí were shocked that a fella of Mark Byrne's calibre could be just taken out like this, in cold blood. So this is, early on, we're getting a sense of what this lad is like. And it was over a personal grievance. It was over some argument or some altercation that they had in jail. Moving on then to July 4th, 2008, about 3 years later. A Lebanese man by the name of Anthony Ayeodigi, he's sitting in a car in Darndale in Dublin. He's sitting in a Volkswagen Golf and he's holding a 22-month-old baby boy. And Robbie Lawlor, cool, calm, collected, walks up this housing estate called Buttercup Park. And he fires 5 shots in through the window of this Volkswagen Golf. Now, miraculously, the baby survives and he's not even seriously injured. But the same can't be said for Anthony, who suffers 3 gunshot wounds and is rushed to hospital in critical condition. Now, he would later survive that attack. But I mean, this is another just crazy, just ruthless gun attack by Lawlor at this point. A baby involved. He doesn't give a damn. These people don't give a damn, obviously. Like if, but anyway, so this is what we're dealing with now. This is the kind of fella we're dealing with. And again, this was over a personal grievance. Lawlor felt like Anthony had slighted him in some way or disrespected him, and this was his solution. This was how he was going to deal with it. Walk up to him and kill him in broad daylight. Now it's 2009, okay? Robbie Lawlor, David Fred Lynch, Noel Deans, the 3 of these boys, 3 criminals, they organised to meet up in Belcamp in Dublin to dig up a weapon, to dig up a gun, right? Now, when they dig up this gun, without warning, Robbie Lawlor shoots David Fred Lynch and he buries his body there on wasteland in Belcamp. Why this was so shocking was because Lawlor and Fred Lynch, they were close friends and associates, but that didn't seem to matter. In the underworld, that doesn't matter. Probably Lawlor was getting paid to do this, to carry out this hit. And so yeah, it's just another just shocking gun attack here from Lawlor. Doesn't give a damn if it's his best friend, his close associate. They don't care. These people. I mean, and it just shows how treacherous he is as well. Huh? Imagine going to dig up a gun and then someone, I shouldn't be laughing, but it's mental. And it shows you the kind of psychopathic traits that this fella is showing at this stage. Alright, so it's a year later. Noel Deans, one of the lads I was on about there who was at this meeting, well, he's in a pub in Priors Wood in Coolock, drinking away, and he's a bit drunk. And he's with another fella called Kenneth Finn, another very dangerous and serious criminal, Kenneth Finn, another hitman that we'll probably get into later on. But the two of them, they're drinking away in Coolock, and Noel Deans is drunk and he's blabbing about the fact that he was there a year previous when Lawlor killed David Fred Lynch. And he's bragging about this and he's openly talking about it in the pub. And so Kenneth Finn gets on the phone to Lawlor and he's like, "Here, lad, you won't believe what's going on here. Noel Deans is on about how he was there with you a year ago when you killed Fred Lynch." And he's all this, right? So anyway, the two boys leave the pub at 10 p.m. And Kenneth Finn, leads Deans down this alleyway. And in that alleyway, Robbie Lawlor is waiting. And he shoots Deans dead. And runs and flees. Shoots him dead. Deans was about 27 years old at the time. And what makes this even more sick is the fact that the very next day, Lawlor apparently went to the mother of Deans, went to the mother's house and was drinking tea and was sympathising with her and talking about all the memories that they had with Noel Deans. And he after killing them the day before. So that murder of Noel Deans strikes me because of how the level of impulsivity that Lawlor is showing at this point. How could, that someone could decide right then and there, right, let's go, we're going killing this lad now because he's a liability, and one day he might be giving testimony against me saying that he was there with me when I killed David Fred Lynch. So he's got to go, and he's got to go right now. So I think early on now, I mean, that was what, 2010? That was January 2010. He's carried out 3 murders, and he's had 1 attempted murder under his belt that I've just talked about. That's what we know of. Now, he was never charged for any of these murders, but it's highly suspected, and it's basically agreed upon that he was behind these ruthless gun attacks. Right? Now, I'm going to skip on. That was 2010. I'm going to skip on to 2017. And that's a 7-year gap. And you might be saying, Cathal, what was he doing during this time? What was he up to? Well, you can imagine what he was up to. This out-and-out criminal. He was up to no good. This out-and-out psychopath, lunatic, Head case, head banger, mental fella, mental. And I'm probably going to say that too many times over the course of this video, but I think it's warranted, no? I won't call anyone else a psychopath in this video, but this lad I will. I mean, come on, it's... I didn't know that there was boys like this in Ireland. I knew there were people carried out gun attacks and people were killed and this and that and the other, but this lad is racking up some serious murders at this point, and he's only a young lad still. Like, it doesn't bode well for the rest of the video. I'm talking about a 7-year gap here, and he didn't turn his life around in that 7-year gap. It only got worse. Oh, just shut up. Right, so as I said, I'm going to move on to 2017, but I will mention his personal life and take a step back from the gangland sort of things, the underworld, and I'm going to say that he had a relationship, a very long-term relationship with a woman named Rachel Kerwin. They went out for many years, and they had kids together also. Now, apparently this relationship was quite rocky, quite abusive, as you can imagine with someone like this, but I believe in 2017 they broke up finally. And sometime later, Robbie Lawlor found out that Rachel Kerwin had a new fella by the name of Derek Mitchell. And he wasn't one bit happy about this, Lawlor. He was furious about this, and he was also furious about the fact that his kids had gotten close with Derek, and had actually gotten close with Derek's mother, Fiona Mitchell. What happened was, Robbie Lawlor started sending threats and started intimidating both Derek Mitchell and his mother, Fiona. And so what I'm going to say is, like, it just shows you how unhinged this fella is becoming at this point, right? We're talking about 2018 at this point, and his violence and brutality is not just limited to the gangland world. And so on the 28th of May, I believe, was it the 28th of May? Fiona Mitchell was sitting in her kitchen. It was about 1 a.m. She was sitting in her kitchen on her phone, and she hears her dog Chopper going mad, barking. And she says, I wonder what's going on there, what's going on? And so she looks out the back of her house, the back kitchen, and she sees 2 gunmen. And she instantly recognizes one of them as Robbie Lawlor. So in a panic, she runs out to the front of her house and she screams at her son to run as well. And he doesn't need to be told twice because he jumps out the sitting room window. But Robbie Lawlor would carry out a vicious gun attack and would fire shots in through the house. Now, thank God, Fiona Mitchell and the son were unscathed, but Robbie Lawlor did manage to shoot and kill the dog Chopper, and he would then flee and get away in an absolutely just vicious attack on a mother, just sitting in her house, relaxing there. I don't know what day of the week it was, but anyway, the 26th of May, 2018. Now, Lawlor would later actually be put on trial for this. Okay, he'd be put on trial, and Fiona Mitchell was a key witness, giving testimony. And Rachel Kerwin also, I believe she gave a statement kind of backing up what Fiona Mitchell was saying, that she reckoned that this was Robbie Lawlor. She knew it was him. But because it wasn't a gangland related, I think it was more of a domestic issue. So it was in a different court. It wasn't in the special criminal court. So the jury actually didn't know about Robbie Lawlor's history. At this point, he would have had, I think in his whole life, he had like 124 convictions. But I don't think the jury would have known about a lot of his history in the underworld, okay? So that was kind of a spanner in the works. Also, what didn't help things was the fact that Rachel Kerwin actually more or less withdrew her statement, or she said that she was lying to police when she first was talking to them and backing up Fiona Mitchell. She said she was lying because she was afraid. So that really was another spanner in the works for the prosecution. And so Robbie Lawlor actually got off with this murder. So he gets released then. He gets released at the end of 2019. December 2019. He walks out of prison on a cold day. Walks out in a big Parker jacket. I think this is a good transition into the next point. It's a brutal gun attack of a very serious drug dealer in Drogheda. His name was Owen Maguire. I could get into the whole Drogheda feud. It was a feud between 2017 and 2020. Robbie Lawlor had his head stuck right in the middle of it. He was very involved in it because he was a brother-in-law of one of the players in this brutal gang feud. He was a brother-in-law of Richie Carberry. Right, I don't want to get into the whole Drogheda feud because it's a lot, but he was heavily involved in it. And as part of that feud, he carried out 2 gun attacks, which I'm going to go through now. Owen Maguire an Irish traveller, mob boss, controlled a lot of drug territory there around the Drogheda region, very lucrative territory at this point. And anyway, Lawlor was an enemy of his, and he turns up one day to his halting site. He shoots him 3 times, I believe. I think when he tried to finish him off, the gun jammed, so he just fled while Maguire was still fighting for his life on the ground. Now, Maguire would later be rushed to hospital and he'd survive, but he'd be left in a wheelchair and he'd be left with a bullet lodged in his spine. But what's interesting about this attack is that very quickly the Gardaí established a perimeter around Drogheda, or they established many checkpoints around all the roads leading out of Drogheda. And they pulled Lawlor over. He was travelling at speed in a Volkswagen Passat. They pulled him over, and get this, he was wearing nothing but underwear, and the car was smelling like petrol. He gave a fake name and fake address. He spun some story of how he was running low on petrol and he had to siphon it and all this. But I mean, he was basically caught in the act trying to get away. He had gotten rid of the gun at that point. I don't know, had he burnt his clothes, or was he going to... He was definitely going to set the car on fire, you can imagine. But like, that the police had caught him in the act, but they still hadn't enough evidence to pin him to this gun attack. They just hadn't, you know? And so he gets away with this, just about. Moving on to another gun attack as part of this feud. In 2018, what date was it in 2018, huh? What date have we this now? What date did this occur? February 25th, 2018. I'm after mixing up dates there, am I? I think I'm after mixing up dates. Now, another brutal gun attack during this feud. On the 25th of February 2018, Kenneth Finn is sitting in his car in Moatview Gardens, Coolock. Now, Kenneth Finn, you might remember earlier on, he was with Noel Deans in the pub that time, and he rang Lawlor and said, Noel Deans is talking about how he was there with you. Kenneth Finn was a very serious criminal, a hitman just like Robbie Lawlor. Lawlor and Finn were actually once associates and friends, but however way the alliances in the underworld had changed, they were on opposite sides. And Lawlor feared that Kenneth Finn was going to kill him. So in a kill or be killed type situation, Lawlor killed Finn first. And on that day, the 25th of February, he was sitting in his car. Lawlor walked up in his usual modus operandi, calmly, and he shot Finn, and he'd eventually died from his injuries. Now look, it's not certain that Robbie Lawlor was the fella that killed him, but it's highly suspected that he was. Just to give you some more context around Kenneth Finn was the hitman of a very, very serious drug dealer in Ireland called Mr. Big. Now, Mr. Big isn't his real name, obviously, but he can't be named for legal reasons, so he's referred to as Mr. Big. And it's a fitting name because he was very big in Ireland. Very big. One of the biggest drug dealers in Ireland at this time. And over the past 20 years, he had slowly grown his power and influence. His stronghold was Coolock in Dublin, but he also sold drugs north of the border, and he was selling drugs in other parts of Ireland outside of Dublin. Very, very serious player, right? Very serious player in the underworld in Ireland. Lawlor and Mr. Big are serious enemies. In fact, Lawlor has many enemies at this point. That fellow Owen Maguire, I said, who he shot and left in a wheelchair. Very serious enemy there in Drogheda. Another lad in and around the Drogheda area, Cornelius Price. I won't get into him, but he's another very serious dude. Mr. Big. Who else have we? Take your pick. There's a rake of enemies that Lawlor is amassing at this point, and he's becoming very hated in the underworld. Grand. Lovely. So, I'm trying to set the scene here. Talking about Fiona Mitchell earlier on, how he was released from prison after getting off on that murder charge. So December 2019, Lawlor's released. There's all these warnings going off in the Garda stations around, saying that there's this very serious criminal, Robbie Lawlor, he's just been released from prison, and the Gardaí knew that something bad was going to happen because Robbie Lawlor was raging at this point. He was furious. Why, you might ask? Well, his brother-in-law, Richie Carberry, had been killed over the course of this feud in Drogheda. I don't want to get into the feud in Drogheda, but it was a very serious feud happening in that part of Ireland. Basically, one big gang had split in two, and it had just, the fallout from it was brutal. And this Richie Carberry, he was trying to muscle in on drug territory there. He was a brother-in-law of Lawlor, if you can kind of follow what I'm saying here. And so Richie Carberry gets killed while Lawlor is in jail. And so when Lawlor comes out, he's gunning for someone, and he's furious. So December 2019, Lawlor's released, and there's just a lot of tension in the air. A lot of tension. Something's going to happen. The feud is at its height, and everyone knows that it's just it's not a matter of if, only when. Okay, lovely, right? Lovely. So we've just explained that December 2019, Lawlor is released from prison, and there's a lot of tension, right? He's spotted in Dublin walking out of a gym. He's spotted by underlings of Mr. Big, young lads who work for him. They see Lawlor walking out of a gym and they're like, lovely, let's go make a video, let's go humiliate this lad. Now, I don't know why you would do that. This is the part of the story that is just really, this is so stupid on the part of these lads to do this. To go poke a bear, to go provoke this psychopathic monster that is Robbie Lawlor. But anyway, they decide that that's a good idea for them to do that at this point. So let's just watch that video again that I played at the start of the video.
Yes! That's only the start of it! That's only the start of it! That's only the start of it, Robbie! Yes! That's only the start of it! That's only the start of it! That's only the start of it, Robbie!
Now, you can be sure, if any of these young lads were on their own, they wouldn't have gone anywhere near this lad. But because there was maybe 5 or 6 of them around, they felt like they could do this. Again, incredibly stupid to go up and to punch Robbie Lawlor like that. Okay, right, anyway. I think this video gives a lot of insight into Lawlor and what he's like, because you can see at the start of the video, in the opening frame, he's there, he's surrounded by 5 or 6 lads, but he seems quite comfortable. He has his hands in his pockets of his puffer jacket. And you might ask, why is he comfortable? How would he be comfortable? How would he be looking confident at this point? Well, think about his reputation, his fearsome reputation in the underworld, as being basically a serial killer at this point. Someone who's not well. Someone who is capable of extreme levels of violence. And, you know, he puts fear into everyone he's hanging around with. And that's what I'm trying to get across to you, right? I want to put you in his circle for a minute. Let's say, for example, that you're in his friend group, you're one of his close associates, and you're hanging around with this lad. You'd be walking on eggshells, you wouldn't try and piss him off. Me personally, I would hate to spill a pint on this lad in the pub, for example. Look, we've all spilled a pint on people, we've all spilled a drink on people, it can even be a funny experience. But I would not like to spill a pint on this Robbie Lawlor bloke. Because, like, I'll probably leave the country. I won't lie. I'll be that shitting it. Because this lad, he's not well. And I'm talking about, what I'm talking about is serious criminals. Other hardened criminals, capable of extreme cruelty, are shitting it around this lad. They don't want to piss him off in case he gets mad and I don't know, he turns up and shoots them someday. Look, I don't know. Look, I really don't know anything about this and about this world. I don't, and I'm not even going to try and say that I do. But I'm just trying to understand these people and trying to understand how they operate, because it seems mental to me. And how you could walk up to this lad then and just punch him in the face. Now, look, there's a bit of history around this because apparently the fella behind the camera he's a fella by the name of Clayton Lynch. Apparently he's a son of the late David Fred Lynch, who I talked about earlier. You know, when Lawlor met up with Deans and Lynch to go dig up this gun and then Lawlor killed Lynch? Yeah, well, this lad behind the camera is apparently his son. And for years he had wanted to get revenge on Lawlor, and he was biding his time. And so when he sees him come out of a gym, he takes his opportunity. But yeah, we can see Lawlor there. It just shows how used to fighting and how used to street fights he is at this point. He's in his mid-30s at this stage, a veteran criminal. And you can see he gets punched there without warning, completely off guard. He takes it fairly well. He takes a couple steps back. He takes off his gear bag so he can launch this absolute haymaker at the fella to his left. And as the video cuts off, he puts his hand into his pocket, and I don't know, maybe he's taken out a knife there at that point. The video cuts off, I don't know. Also in this video, at the very end, he has this kind of high-pitched laugh that, given everything we know about this lad, is just scary.
Robbie.
So if you'll indulge me, we're going to watch the video yet again, with all the information that you're now armed with. I think this is the most interesting piece of media in the whole thing, because I've shown you pictures, I've shown you maps of Coolock and of Drogheda and of God. Boring. It's all boring. compared to seeing how these people actually act. A video. What do they sound like? What do they look like? How are they interacting with each other? Because I've just told you stuff now until this. This is an actual video, all right? So let's just watch it one more time, okay?
Get on video. Get on video. Me staying here. Yes! That's only the start of it. That's only the start of it. That's only the start of it, Robbie.
So yeah, just an incredibly stupid move from these young lads. Do you agree? To go and provoke this lad at this point, this feud is very tense, and well, obviously these boys have a lot of animosity with them. And so what happens after this video, you see him there drop his gear bag, and he starts to retreat because he's outnumbered. He can't fight these 6 lads, so he retreats. And these young lads take his gear bag, they bring it home, they open it up, they find flip-flops or sliders in the gear bag. And what they do, as well as posting this video that I just showed you, as well as posting that online to try and humiliate Lawlor, they also take videos of themselves wearing the flip-flops. And they post these pictures and videos online in an attempt to humiliate and just disrespect Lawlor. Again, I don't know why you would do that, but anyway, that's what these lads do. And Lawlor does not take this lying down. He doesn't take it well, as you can imagine, right? It is to be expected. He does not take this well, and he goes about exacting his revenge. And the way he does so is just absolutely brutal, and it's sick and disgusting. Alright, so let's move back to Drogheda in Louth, and we're going to talk about a fella by the name of Cian Mulready Woods. At this point, 17 years old, he was heavily involved in the major drug feud that was raging in Drogheda at this point. He was right in the middle of it, okay? This lad, he had dropped out of school early. At 15, he apparently pointed a gun at a shop manager. At 16, he allegedly broke the window of a home of a mother of a boy who owed a drug debt in Drogheda, and he tossed in a petrol bomb. You know, his role in the gang was to threaten and intimidate people and family members who owed drug debts. He was no saint, this lad. He carried out many petrol and pipe bomb attacks on his gang rivals. He had apparently been playing both sides of this feud at this point, which is obviously never a smart thing to be doing. And he, coming up to this event that I'm going to talk about, he was wearing a bulletproof vest when he went out. At 17 years old, to be wearing a bulletproof vest in Ireland, like what? So obviously he knew himself. He knew himself that he was in deep in this thing. And actually on the 5th of January 2020, the Gardaí issued him with an official warning that there was a threat to his life. Oftentimes when the Gardaí have enough intelligence to tell them that someone is in danger, they'll go and they'll tell this person, like, you're in danger, people want to kill you, be careful. But in any case, on the 12th of January 2020, Cian Mulready Woods would go missing. He was last seen taking a taxi from his house in Drogheda to a Centra shop. There he met Paul Crosby, another very serious and violent criminal that was heavily involved in this drug feud at this point. And so Cian Mulready Woods meets Paul Crosby, and CCTV footage and witnesses say that it seemed like a fairly calm affair. There didn't seem to be any animosity between these two people. Anyway, Cian, Paul Crosby, they get into the car of Gerard Cruz, and Cian Mulready Woods is lured to a house in Rathmunnon Park. And at that house, Robbie Lawlor is waiting. And the following is just so horrific and so brutal. Lawlor tortures Cian. He murders him. It's believed by stab wounds. It's believed he stabbed him to death. And then he used power tools and maybe a chainsaw to dismember his body and cut him up into pieces. Just an absolutely brutal, barbaric attack. Lawlor at this point was twice his age. This lad was 17 years old, still a child, like. I know he was heavily involved in this. He was no saint. He was capable of a lot of cruelty and he was capable of a lot of nasty things. But he was still a 17-year-old who got caught up in this, lured by designer clothes, money, status. And I don't think anyone could have expected that he met his end like this. But in any case, Robbie Lawlor brutally killed him on this evening. I believe it was January 12th, 2020. And the following is just disgusting. So, a day later, maybe a couple of days after it, so this happened in Drogheda, right? A couple of days later, in Coolock, North Dublin, Mr. Big's stronghold, and in the very same estate that a lot of these young lads who jumped Lawlor that day outside the gym, well, they live in this estate, Moatview Gardens, Coolock. And anyway, a couple of days after January 12th, when Keane was brutally killed, a fella is walking and he spots a black Puma gear bag on the footpath. And so he picks it up. He's curious. He thinks that there might be money in it. There might be drugs. There might be something valuable in it. For whatever reason, it just looks suspicious. So he brings it home. He opens it up in his house to find the dismembered legs of Keane Mulready Woods, along with flip-flops or sliders. And he panics. He brings it back to the spot that he found it. And whatever, the guards eventually get alerted and they discover it, and it's later confirmed to be the dismembered legs of Keane Mulready Woods. This gear bag was apparently thrown out of the window of a car by Robbie Lawlor or his associates in an attempt to intimidate his rivals, intimidate Mr. Big, intimidate the people who jumped him outside the gym, and really to send a message. And yeah, it was revenge for what they had done. Then, was it that night or the next day, locals in Drumcondra, another neighbourhood in the north part of Dublin City, locals there, they spot a burnt out car, or a car in flames, and they think initially that it's just joyriders. You know, very typical thing. Young lads steal a car, take it for a spin, do a load of donuts or whatever, and then they eventually go and they set it on fire. So they think that it's that. But when the fire brigade turn up, they find in the boot of the car the smouldering head of Keane Mulready Woods, along with his arms and hands. It's suspected that Robbie Lawlor and his associates had intended to drop these remains off at another enemy at his compound in Meath in Gormanstown. This Cornelius Price fella I had mentioned earlier on. They believed that was the initial plan, but somewhere along the way they panicked and they just left the car there, set it on fire, and they ran. And as for the torso of Keane Mulready Woods, this wouldn't be found until much, much later. The funeral and everything else had to go ahead before that. But I believe his torso was found in and around the Rathmullen Park area. And this is just, yeah, I mean, I can't get over this. How someone could be so brutally killed. A 17-year-old. Like, these things just don't happen in Ireland. You know, they just don't happen. And as well, more details. A couple of days later, videos would be surfaced online and they'd be shared on WhatsApp. Videos showing barbaric and grotesque images of the inside of a house, and you can make out muscle and flesh and blood and a chainsaw. And the video doesn't have any audio as well, which makes it even more creepy. And I actually remember at this time, this story was so huge in Ireland, and I remember walking into school one day and one of the lads had this on their phone, had this video, and he was showing it around. And I think I saw a couple of seconds of it. I don't know what I saw, but whatever I saw, it wasn't good. But this story, as I said, it was huge in Ireland. It made international headlines because of just the brutality, the sick, twisted. This was all a game to Robbie Lawlor. You know, this was a game to get back at all his enemies, to intimidate them and to spread fear. And it's believed around this time, in the days leading up and in the days even after this murder, Robbie Lawlor didn't go into hiding. He didn't go to ground. He was seen around Drogheda. He was the man about town. He probably had this air of superiority of like, I've gotten away with all these murders in the past and I can get away with this one and no one's going to touch me. Everyone's going to be afraid of me now. A lot of other people did go into hiding. All these other people that these young lads that jumped him outside the gym, that they did go into hiding because they thought they were going to be next. From this point on in 2020, this is when the Drogheda feud really kind of burnt out after this, because a lot more attention was put on Drogheda and the Gardaí got more resources and they really took it to the gangs and they put a lot of people behind bars, and there was people charged in relation to Keane Mulready Woods' murder. But yeah, just again, like this is why I made this video, because it's the most shocking part. It's I can't get over it. I don't understand it. Ireland, it's such a small country, 5 million population, thereabouts. A very, very safe country, relatively speaking. That these kind of things can happen. It's this story fascinates me, it shocks me, and it scares me, because it's kind of hard to wrap your head around this. But this happened in 2020. And for someone like Lawlor, as I said before, part of the reason they carry out these brutal gun attacks and these vicious murders is for the sense of control. These psychopaths, that's what they get out of these murders, a sense of power and control. And it instills fear in everyone around them. And like I said, all the people in Robbie Lawlor's circle, and all the people who know of him and are associated with him, and even his enemies, they know how crazy he is. Lawlor knows himself how crazy he is. But as well as that, he's always trying to up the ante. He's always trying to outdo himself. And that's how things like this happen. This was all a game to him. Dropping off the partial remains of this 17-year-old, it was all one big game. But for the family of Keane Mulready Woods, can you imagine the horror? And it took a long time for them to find the torso. The funeral had to go ahead first. Like they had more or less given up on being able to find that. You may not have heard of Robbie Lawlor before clicking on this video, but if you're from Ireland, you definitely heard about this case back in 2020 when it happened. COVID was just starting, January 2020, and this was all over the news. It was a horrible story, horrible. And yeah, Robbie Lawlor at this point, his mental health had been deteriorating rapidly, his mental state. He was on a diet of cocaine and steroids. He was addicted to these substances. And yeah, so that's obviously going to make all of these parts of his personality even worse. But anyway, after the murder of Keane Mulready Woods, he's working north of the border, up in Belfast. And he's working there, he's offering his services there. Why is he up there? Maybe because he's not welcome anywhere near North Dublin or Drogheda. He had more enemies than you could shake a stick at. Right? Again, serious dudes. Mr. Big, Cornelius Price, Owen Maguire, a load of other boys. Kind of like take your pick. So he was a dead man walking even long before this brutal murder of this 17-year-old in Drogheda. But anyway, COVID is just kicking off. We're getting really into COVID now. People can't go, whatever it was, 5 kilometers. I don't know what it was. I forget. Thank God I forget. But anyway, April 2020, April 4th, Robbie Lawlor is driven to a house in Ardoyne, Belfast. He's accompanied by 2 other serious criminals, Ger Dundon and Levi Killeen. Right, so they go to this house. Robbie Lawlor gets out, and as he approaches the front door, a gunman opens the front door and comes out and shoots him dead. He takes off. And the 2 boys that dropped him off, they sped away in the car. So there he was killed in Ardoyne, Belfast on a Saturday morning in the height of COVID. That was very strange, very confusing at the time when journalists were reporting on it. Gardaí, they were like, what was he doing up here? Why was he killed here? Why didn't his enemies kill him in North Dublin where they knew the routes, they knew the roads, they knew the terrain? Who killed him? The details around his death are very murky. People don't know who killed him, but it's suspected now that Mr. Big was behind this assassination in a very complicated web of betrayal, you could say. Right around this time when Robbie Lawlor was killed in 2020, okay, police forces in the Netherlands and in France were carrying out this EncroChat hack. So EncroChat was a encrypted messaging system that a lot of criminals in Europe were using at this time. They saw it as like a bulletproof method of communicating and organising things. But what they didn't know at the time was that there was boys there in the police force in the Netherlands and France that were listening in on them in a live hack. Yeah? So Grand. This information, all this evidence that they had gleaned from this, wasn't passed on to the Gardaí on Garda Síochána and the PSNI in Northern Ireland. It wasn't passed on to them for a long time, years in fact. But now in 2025, I believe the Gardaí and the PSNI, yeah, sorry, that's hard for me. But anyway, they now believe that Mr. Big was in some way involved in this assassination of Robbie Lawlor. So there you have it. He was killed in Belfast, 2020. He lived a very short and chaotic life. And yeah, that's how he met his fate. But I'm just going to go onto his Instagram account now, and you might think that's a bit weird, but look at, it's interesting, very interesting, because there's a couple of posts there, and I find them to be a bit bizarre. There's quite a number of posts here, and they're still up, and it's quite eerie, his page, because he was shot and killed 4 years ago, and as I said, he was a crazy dude. But we're just going to have a quick look here. There's a couple of things I want to point out. In 2018, in the height of the Drogheda feud, he goes to a few countries. He goes to Italy, he goes to Palestine, and I don't know, was he just trying to get away from his enemies for a bit or something like that? But we have him here outside the Colosseum in Rome. And I don't know if someone tells you someone is a psychopath, and then you see a picture of them, and it's like, well, yeah, their eyes, like, look at their eyes. It looks like they're just looking through you. It looks like there isn't much going on behind there. And I mean, the same kind of can be said of this fella. So there he is, enjoying himself in Italy. But when he goes to Palestine, he takes a video with himself and these children, and he's just giving them jerseys. He's handing out jerseys, and he takes a picture with them. And I just find this very bizarre, because it's an act of charity, and I mean, if these lads knew what he was capable of, these young lads.
Yeah. Good. PSG, Chelsea. يا ريال مدريد نيمار دا سيلفا.
Anyway, that's enough of that. He ends up taking pictures with these lads. Very bizarre. This lad is a serial killer. Gangland serial killer. Sure, they don't know that. And there's another video here. I think he's in London or Manchester on a night out with a buddy of his, and they start kind of harassing this homeless person. I don't know what you call it, harassment, but they're just, yeah, she seems a bit uncomfortable. But anyway, we're just going to have a look.
Now, what's your name?
Lou.
And how much did we give you?
About 8 quid, 10.
But that's all the change we had, because look at, is she not the image of Eddie Uzel? No, come here. But at the end of the day, look at I fucking car up. Lou, that's acting the bollocks. What have you got to say, Lou?
Thank you.
Nah, Lou, it's a pleasure meeting you.
Oh.
Okay, now look after yourself. Now what are you going to do with that tonight? We'll do that. Well, look, gives a way. Alright, look after yourself, Lou. Well, I promise you I'll go to Lou every day. Lou. Right. Now,
Right. Now, I don't know. He kind of seems like a half normal person, right? He's anything but. Everything I've told you in this video shows you that this lad was seriously had a screw loose in a major way. Alright lads, so that was it. That was the short and chaotic life of Robbie Lawlor, a ruthless Irish gangland serial killer. Now, a lot of the information I got to make this video came from a book I read by the crime reporter in Dublin, Nicola Tallant, and her book is Web of Betrayal. And it's a really great book, really interesting, and especially if you want to know more about Robbie Lawlor's death and who was potentially behind his assassination, I'd seriously recommend that book, so give it a read. Also, she has a podcast on a YouTube channel called Crime World, very interesting podcast as well, that breaks down a lot of the players in the gangland underworld in Ireland, and it's very interesting as well, so I give that a watch or a listen, I don't know. As well, before I sign off here, I just want to say that, like, you know, I talk about a lot of criminals here. I talk about a lot of people who are capable of seriously nasty things, and people that you probably want to avoid in life, obviously. But, you know, anytime anyone is killed, even if it's a hardened criminal, there's a lot of people around that, a lot of ordinary, normal people, good people, that their lives are turned upside down. And all the events I've talked about here, a lot of them just led to a lot of chaos and destruction and pain and suffering for a lot of people. And I don't want to downplay that, alright? So yeah, that's the video, lads. If you liked it, give it a like. And if you want to subscribe, that would be a great help as well. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Good luck! Right? Are serious enemies. Right? Very serious enemy there in Drogheda. Very serious dude. But it was a very serious feud. Very big. Very, very serious player. Right? 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 At this point, an altercation. Right? A serious altercation. Kenneth Finn was a very serious criminal. Another very dangerous and serious criminal. There's this very serious criminal. Another serious criminal. Other hardened criminals. Right? Serious criminals. Another serious criminal.